So, testing, one, two, three. Let's have a look and see if I'm live. Yes, I am. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Um, for those who are new here, my name is Lloyd de Jong, in case anyone wonders how my surname is spoken. And so many old friends of the channel here. I see Sergeant Grinch, I see Kirjana Hamilton, I see Anella, uh, let's see, Carol B, Horse, Deduza, uh, Jane Long. Hello, Jane. Thank you. Let's see. Polski Bombowiec, Che Division. We've got Yakov. Welcome, guys. Good to see everyone here. I see Tim Chapman. Villainous has just shown up. Welcome, Villainous. Joel's. And Zachar. So, everyone, thanks for being here today. Today I expect we will finish monotheism, and then I've got roughly 80 other presentations I need to get ready. So MK2 Tech, hello everyone. Hey Daro. Okay, Berlin, welcome. Uh, let's see. Yeah, so we have a number of presentations to go, but I'm trying to keep. So I want to finish this. I need to finish the Sharia, and then I will keep on with this history. I'd like to start moving towards Arabic history, especially that of the jinn and Arabic culture. That will answer a lot of questions as to where some of these Arabic ideas came from. So each of my slide series sort of discusses a different aspect of Islam, but there's so many rabbit holes to go down, so much to explore that is actually really fascinating. Hello, Arnold Nathaniel, welcome. And right, so yeah, but let's just jump in. I think we've got about 20 slides, and I should finish this tonight. And then what I want to do is maybe on the weekend, or in a couple of days, I'd sort of open up to do an AMA, so I can ask me anything. You guys can come on and ask questions. Maybe you can ask me how I do my research, and we can maybe pick a topic, like, I don't know, pick like a Gnostic sect or something, and say, okay, how do we research these guys? So that's something we can do. And yeah, Your Highness, welcome. And Timur, most welcome. Yeah, the jinn, this is a very interesting subject. It's a very, very interesting subject. And it is covered. There's some great videos on the internet, obviously, but I do try to bring a different perspective to this. I try to relate it to what we already know. Yeshua the King, wow, thank you very, very much. Much appreciated. Off-topic question. Do Muslims need consent to have intercourse with their slaves? If not, do you have the source that speaks about that? No, they do not. No, they do not. Let me actually then go to, let me bring up a source that mentions that. Give me a sec. So you guys should be looking at my screen now. And so let me go to the beginning here. Yes, a little further ahead, further than I anticipated. So no, a Muslim slave owner does not need permission to have sex. For instance, this one. Now, the reason that I use this, this is Neil Bailey's. This is, okay, page 26. Let me go to the beginning so you can see the title of the book. This is obviously in my archive. So this is a scan, a Google scan, I believe, or an archive.org scan. This is from the Library of the Theological Seminary at Princeton, right? And this book is called A Digest of Muhammadan Law. I can see a Library of Princeton. And on the subjects to which Muhammadan law is usually applied, and by the British Courts of Justice in India, compiled and translated from the authorities in the original Arabic. Now, the reason I use this book is that this book is one of the 4 most commonly quoted books in the Pakistani legal system as an example. So these books are still very much used in modern Islamic court systems today. Right? So let me see. Now let's go back to this page that I wanted to quote for you. Here we go. So if you look here, for instance, they speak here very openly of When a man has had sexual intercourse with a girl under the age of 9 years and has ruptured the parts, now you can imagine an adult male with a girl under the age of 9 years, the age is unspecified, so this could be an infant, she could be months old, and has ruptured the parts. I don't have to tell you which parts. It is unlawful for him to have further connection. Connection, you can obviously infer that as, doing the deed. But she is not released from her ties, so she remains married to him, or she remains a slave if connected with him by marriage or slavery. So he doesn't need permission because they are his property. This is his property. And of course, it says within the Islamic law that a wife does not have the right to refuse a man sex. Okay, a wife does not have the right to refuse. And of course, a slave is of an even lower social position and a lower legal position than a wife. So hopefully that answers your question. Right. Was there anything else? Were there any other questions? So you guys can tag me in the comments if you have any questions. I know it's disgusting, but it is the truth. And I also need to do this Gnostic series I started on Thaddeus' channel. I actually need to do that on my channel. So, yeah. Okay, so you know where we ended off last time, right? So for those, I've been doing this for a long period. Do they really need permission to do anything? That seems there's always a loophole. No, but this, Tim, is very true. There is literally always a loophole in Islamic law. Right? There is always a loophole. Every law can be reversed. Every law can be inverted. Every law can be temporarily put aside and ignored. So this is the case. There's nothing that is regarded as sacrosanct. Yeah, as Villainous says, chattel slavery implies zero rights for the slave. So, yeah. Now, let's have a look at a scholar called C.S. Kuhn, Trade Links and War Gods. Now, in his papers, I think his papers go back about 70 years or more, their surface message is clear. The kingdoms of southern Arabia, like that of the Nabateans further north, were in contact with the entire ancient world. Now remember, most of the scholarship these days focuses on Nabatea, focuses on north and east. However, identical conditions or even better conditions are found south and west. So we're looking at south into Yemen and west into Africa. And this is something that has been largely overlooked. I mean, this is completely underrepresented in the literature. That's not to say that literature does not exist. It is simply not followed up by scholarship. Tim Chapman, that is a very wise statement. It's a law for how to break the law. Correct. It's a law for how to violate the moral law of the Bible, because Islam is based on Gnostic beliefs, and it's strongly influenced by Manichaeism. So, okay, so their surface message is clear. The kingdoms of southern Arabia, like that of the Nabateans further north, were in contact with the entire ancient world. So these cultures were trading with India, maybe as far as China, definitely with Rome and Greece, and from Rome to India and perhaps beyond, objects of Roman, Greek, Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Indian manufacture abound. So these cultures were trading. So even Indian ideas were spreading into Arabia. Scarabs, amulets, bronze statues in the Roman manner, dragon feet and grape bunch ornamentation in the Syrian and Byzantine manner, and Greek columns all witness the linkage of this region with the Mediterranean. The names of gods monotonously repeated, the abundance of seated votive idols and ex-votos from phalli. That's a phallus is, a phallus. Okay, just like it's the opposite of a vajayjay. To oxen indicate a devotion to religion and a belief in divine cures. Animal figurines, blah, blah, blah. Let's continue. He goes on in his paper on this region. Right? This is an archaeological paper. At some chronological point between the two dates mentioned, southern Arabia came into prominence as a highly civilized agricultural region. So it was not primitive. They had writing, they had reading, they were trading, they were traveling all over. So at some point they were a Silk Road, yes. Flourishing near the source of the incense trade route, which was Yemen, which went up from the Hadramaut around the western edge of the empty quarter to Mecca, Medina, and the ports of the eastern Mediterranean. It also served as the principal or only route by which goods from India were transported and carried overland. So they had very strong trade ties and thus very strong cultural ties with India. So these ideas, these Indian ideas, and Islam most certainly does have Hindu ideas. Now they speak here of, there are two Sabaean periods. The earlier called the Muqarrib period, in which the king bore the title Muqarrib. Now we've discussed Muqarrib at length. I'm not going to go into it here, but it's in the earlier videos where I speak extensively of Muqarrib. The Muqarrib became the title that was used eventually in Islam. Before the term Caliph, you had Muqarrab. After Muqarrab, you had the Abd al-Malik. And the Abd al-Malik was the slave of Baal, right? The servant of Baal. So the Muqarrab was the term that the Yemenis used. The Muslims decided they needed a new term. So they obviously changed to the Abd al-Malik, which then became the Caliph, which indicated a primarily priestly office, and a later one in which he is called the Malik, the common Semitic word for king. But the Malik is also Malik, Moloch. Moloch is Baal. Moloch is the god of child sacrifice. Moloch is also Satan. A parallel transition took place in Qataban. Right? So now we know that the Muqarrabs, the Yemeni Muqarrabs, became the Arab Maliks, like Abd al-Malik. Now, Your Highness asks a very good question. I wonder why there are no archaeology allowed in the Islamic countries. If there is, they make it very difficult to be done, or they bomb the sites, or they pave over them. So yes, they know that. I believe these scholars are aware. I think that they know that this is an issue. Right. The most important Muqarrab of Saba was Kariba Ilu, the priest of the god Il, okay, Il Makkah, who killed 4,000 men in a war against Qataban and then turned on Ma'an and killed 45,000 while taking 63,000 prisoners and 31,000 head of cattle. At the same time, his army laid the Najran country waste. Najran would be in the south here. So let's have a quick look at Najran. Let me pull this over. Oops. Najran, of course, is down here. So this is Mecca here. It's about 800 kilometers away, 800 kilometers. This is Yemen. We're talking about this region here in Yemen, and this is Najran. This was a Christian city. Now, of course, it's also known as Arabia Heresium Ferax, the bearer of heresies. So major heresies where heretics escaped Rome. They came here. They spread their heresies, and the Christian missionaries had a huge ideological fight in their hands with the heretics and Gnostics here in Najran. Destroying the Manaeans forever. 2 Assyrian inscriptions dated 715 and 685 BC respectively serve to locate this Kariba Ilu accurately in time. Now do notice that, remember, the moon gods were war gods. The moon gods of this region were war gods. Allah is a moon god, therefore Allah is a warm god. And Muhammad, as in his jihad, was simply emulating the kind of warfare that these people carried out. Now, to speak of the arrival of Islam is relatively well known in 24 BC. Now, this is interesting. So, we're looking at early history of Mecca, right? In 24 BC, Aelius Gallus led an expedition to conquer this whole section, known to the Romans as Arabia Felix, or Happy Arabia. But the Romans never got there. Somewhere in the sands near the Najran, the majority of them perished, and those who survived at this point turned back. Now, let's go back to the map. So, these guys, these Roman 10,000 men or 11,000 men left from, I believe, this region near Alexandria or somewhere in this area, right? So they left from here. They traveled south. Very few of them got back. They traveled there. Somewhere around this area, their boat capsized, right? They lost their boat or whatever, their boats. So there was some kind of storm and there's some issue. And they marched down the coast and they ended up somewhere around here. Right? And there is no mention in the records because there was a historian. There's a very well-known first century historian with them. He makes no mention of Mecca. So none of the early records, there's additional blot here. This guy mentions what they did. He mentions the long march. He mentions 11,000 men that never walked apparently past Mecca but never saw it. So, right, Sayyidina Najran to the Christian continent confronted Muhammad just prior to his death. Of course, that's in yeah. So let's see. Right, so now moving on. Okay, about 270 AD, the Aksumite Ethiopians conquered Arabia Felix and ruled it. They were Christians and set up bishops and bishoprics. So hold on. The Aksumite Christians, this is Aksum over here, these were Christians that were Christianized very early on. They traveled across, they conquered this entire region, possibly up here as far as Petra, towards Petra, possibly as far as this, but at the very minimum up to Medina. They conquered this whole region. They controlled it economically, right? They held it for decades. So Christians at one point owned this region. This was Christian. But by 378 AD, apparently their rule had come to an end. The Aksumites themselves were the descendants in whole or in part of earlier immigrants from the Hadramaut who had carried Semitic civilization to Ethiopia, and they become Christianized. Now it's very interesting that why does Islam have Gnostic Christianity, Gnostic Christology in it, rather than actually having Orthodox Ethiopian Christology? Why doesn't it repeat the Bible? Because the interesting thing is that these Ethiopians had a complete Bible. They had the full Bible. So why is it that Islam has Gnostic and heretical Christology rather than actual accurate Orthodox Christology? Anela, interesting you say. What are your thoughts on that? Let's see. Okay, now there are 100 moon god attributes. Okay, now I've mentioned before that Muslims like to talk about and they like to mislead and read and misdirect. Good grief. What was that? Okay, so they like to say that, some noise in the background. So they like to talk about the fact that Allah has 99 names. No, Allah does not have 99 names. Of course, if you look at different lists of names, you'll find 99 different attributes on those lists. But those are qualities, characteristics, attributes of Allah. They are not names of Allah. Right? Allah has only one name, a secret name, and that name is not Allah. Now, the Christian God of the Bible, the Jewish God of the Bible, has a name, Yahweh, Yahovah. Right? This was given to Moses. So give me 1 second. So you have the name of the God of the Bible, Yahovah. We do not know the name of the Islamic God. Now we know that it was called Hubal in the time of Muhammad, right? Before his birth and after his birth, this God was called Hubal, which is Baal. Right? We know it was also called Sin. We know it was called Al-Makkah, right? That's where we get the name of the town Makkah. Now, the names of Allah are not names, they are attributes. He has one name and it is a secret name. So moving on, Jane, I've seen your messages and so on, and you're very welcome, but do understand that the whole conspiracy theory thing, a lot of it's overblown, and I really don't have a great deal of patience with that. So now they speak here of thus the prototype of the modern Zawiya and its Sheikh or Faqih existed in pre-Islamic Sabah. Now these concepts that Muslims say, that Islam says, that claims are unique to Islam, these existed in the pagan tribes prior to it. So it really just borrowed and absorbed the very same pagan ideas. So the Sheikh was a pre-Islamic Sabaean idea, and of course the Sabaeans worshipped the moon god. Right? Then, of course, the Faqih existed in pre-Islamic Sabah. These were they're men of knowledge and they're legal scholars. So these are ideas taken straight out of paganism, literally out of moon worship. And they claim that these ideas, no. This is monotheism, people. This is straight out of the Bible. No, this is straight out of pagan tribes that opposed God, opposed the Bible. Anela says, I hear and see this for the first time. It's much deeper than I thought, and many Muslims among me as an ex-Muslim never looked up such sources. Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad I can provide some fresh information. So now let's continue. The inscriptions consist largely of the names of gods, of which over 100 are known. Many of them are attribute names, such as Wad, which means love, Sadiq, truth, and Rahman, the compassionate. Remember, the Muslims borrowed this from the Jewish name and the Christian name for God, which passed over into Islamic terminology. So from this scientific paper by this scholar, very well-respected scholar, we learn now that these ideas, these names, passed over into Islam. So they borrowed. Remember, Arabic, they claim it's an Arabic Quran. Muslims claim this is an Arabic Quran, but of course it consists of something like 55 different languages and more than 2,000 foreign words. So we know of well over 2,000 foreign words in the Quran and more than 50 languages. That is not an Arabic Quran. Right? And yes, Abraham was a pillar worshiper before Yahweh called him. Correct. That's why I have these pillars here. Let's continue. So the god of the Manaeans was Wad, that of the Katbanians was Amma, and that of the Hadramis Shin, and of the Sabaeans Al-Makkah. All were the moon. Now it's interesting that Islam is now borrowing ideas and concepts and words from pagan moon worship. These are all the very same god, different names. That's all it is. And Shin, of course, is the moon god of Babylon. Now the simple truth of the matter, Quran 38:5. Maketh Muhammad the gods one Allah? Is he taking all of these different gods and just rolling them into one, making them one God? Well, yes. Lo, so maketh he the gods one Allah. Lo, that is an astounding thing. And their leaders went about, leave Muhammad, and cling steadfastly to your gods. Indeed, he has a hidden objective in this. We never heard of this even in Christianity, the latest religion. This is clearly a newly fabricated matter. So Muhammad's people, the people living around him, were saying he was fabricating things, right? He is suddenly making all the gods into one Allah, taking all of the characteristics of all the gods, making them into one God. This paper goes on to say, this multiplication of God names does not imply an extensive polytheism, which is why I've said before that the 360 gods of the Kaaba were not 360 different gods. They were one God, just 360 aspects of God. Like someone might call Christ the Redeemer. Someone else might call him the Shepherd. So you see the Church of Christ the Redeemer, the Church of Christ the Shepherd. You can see Christ to you as salvation, so Christ the Savior. Are those three separate religions? No, they're the same God. They're the same church. They're just three aspects that are being worshipped, or three aspects that are being identified. So it doesn't mean that you have 360 religions. It means there's one religion. So that is why Allah does not have 99 names, Sergeant Grinch. Allah has 99 characteristics, qualities, aspects, right? Love is not the name of Allah, right? Wisdom is not the name of Allah. Righteousness is not the name of Allah. Justice, these are characteristics, qualities. Allah has a name. Ask Muslims, Allah has a name. He has one name, a secret name. You don't know the name, right? Allah has one secret name. Who knows what that name is? We know at the time of Muhammad, Allah was called Al-Makkah. He was called Shin. He was called Baal. Now, this multiplication of God names does not imply an extensive polytheism. All of the names, all of the gods have been reduced to only three: the sun, the moon, and the Venus star. These are respectively represented in sculpture as a disk, a crescent, and an 8-pointed star. Each of these three had many functions and attributes, each with a name. These are attributes. Now, the reduction of these to three is only exceeded by the Islamic heaping of all attribute names on a single divinity. So this is simply rolling it all out into one. Andrew, please drop us a note as to what it is. Although there were but three gods, each might be worshipped separately in different aspects under different names. So it's three gods under different aspects, under different names. Muhammad just rolled the lot into one. So now look at Wikipedia, lunar calendar, further information. Okay, so the moon plays a significant role in Islam because of the use of a lunar Islamic calendar to determine the date of Ramadan. The crescent moon known as Hilal, and we know Hilal was the name of a pagan god, right? Defines the start and end of Islamic months as it did for the Babylonian calendar. So this idea of the lunar calendar, obviously Islam borrowed from the Babylonian calendar. It borrowed so much from the Babylon. I'm getting that annoying tick in the stream. Okay, yeah. Let me see if I can do something about my audio just in case it's me, but I mean, who knows what YouTube might be doing. So I'm going to check my audio, but yeah, remember YouTube's been doing this for a long time. They will give certain grief to people. That are all of you experiencing this weird sound, or is it just one or two people? Because it's typical, one or two people will get bad audio. YouTube just does that to some people. Okay, yeah, my audio levels were too low for some reason. No reason why. Okay, I've pushed up my audio. Tell me if this sounds better. Villainous, is this better? Okay, I'll bring the mic closer, and so tell me. And the answer is Waraka. Muhammad's father, Islam's ancestor. Oh, okay. Okay, right. Okay, great. It fixes itself after. Yeah, that's typically what it does after 12 hours. Okay, so everyone else is, so looks like you were the guy that was picked today, Villainous. Sorry about that. Okay, so moving on. Now notice the phases of the moon. This is the new moon. This is the young moon. This is the Hilal, right? This is the crescent moon of Islam. This is the waxing crescent, the waxing quarter, the waxing gibbous, the full moon, the waning gibbous, waning quarter, and so on. Old moon. So Il, the name Il or Ilah, which we know just me. Sorry about that. So Al-Ilah is a phase of the moon god. So the way the pagans used the name Il or Ilah was originally a phase of the moon god. We know that Al-Ilah, well, I mean, you say this in the Shahada. So this name referred to a phase of the moon god. These are the phases, the 12 phases of the moon. So the god Il or the god Ilah was originally a phase of the moon god. But early in Arabian history, the name became a general term for God. So Allah is a general term. It's just the God. It's not the name of God. It's a descriptor. It was this name that the Hebrews used prominently in their personal names, such as Emmanuel, Israel, rather than the Baal of the northern Semites proper, which was the sun. Similarly, under Muhammad's tutelage, the relatively anonymous Ilah became Al-Ilah, the God, or Allah, the supreme being. So this is a title. So understand, El and Ilah both referred to phases of the moon god. So this term, Al-Ilah, the god, or Allah, the supreme being, originally in that history of that region, referred explicitly to the moon god. Now, we know that the influence of the late classical world in the Sabaean kingdom cannot be overemphasized. So now we learn from this paper as well that the Greeks and Byzantines must have been imported to the Sabaean state to make statues and to carve stone. In earlier periods, the Egyptian and Mesopotamian influences were equally important. So I've mentioned before, there's an Egyptian influence within Islam, right? The Sufis claim to be the inheritors of the original Egyptian mystery religions. That's a story for another day. We know that they've been influenced by Mesopotamia, by Babylon. The South Arabian cities were commercial metropoles of a cosmopolitan character, grafted on a simpler agricultural state in which imported goods and styles probably were more important. Now, we will mention something about Taif as well, which is another city in Arabia. The Imamate of the Yemen, a modern priestly kingdom. Now, this is really interesting. This paper goes on. It's a very, very interesting paper by this Kuhn guy. So the Imamate of Yemen, a modern priestly kingdom. The transition from moon, sun, and Venus worship to Islam and from Sabaean speech and writing to Arabic was not as drastic and complete a change as the Yemenites may imagine. Although the trade upon which the Imam himself, the successor of a long line of holy ancestors, calls himself by the title Amir al-Mu'minin, the commander of the faithful, which is equivalent to Caliph. Now, this is fascinating. Marais Sui, welcome. Good to see you. Sufis are frauds. They claim everything. Sure, but they are also the highest ranked in Islam. Now, we've mentioned before, and I did this much earlier in the episode, in the episodes that we're discussing, the Amir al-Mu'minin, before they were called Muslims, they were called the Mu'minin, the believers. Right? The believers is a term they stole from the Christians. But they were the true believers, and they believed that the Christians obviously had gone corrupt. Right? So they were called Mu'minin for a long time, for decades, if not 200 years, before they chose the name from a subsect of the Umayyads to become the Muslims, to give themselves separation. Right, because there was this ecumenical movement of these believers in monotheism, and then the Muslims wanted to separate themselves, and they took the name Muslim. But prior to that, they were called the Mu'minin, the believers. Of course, the Min or the Manin is Jewish for heretics, and I've mentioned this before. The Manin is from the Jewish word for heretics. So these were heretical people. So the Jews used this as a term against them, as a slur against them, to call them heretics, unbelievers, right? And of course, they adopted this term to say, well, we're the true believers, we'll accept it. Just like the term Christian was originally an epithet used against Christians, they adopted the term. So it's interesting that the Mu'minin was a name applied to the Yemeni moon worshippers, right, the Sabaeans. The modern Yemenite system may without difficulty be shown to parallel the social organization of the Sabaeans. Now that's fascinating. This is a guy writing in the 20th century, and he's telling us the modern Yemenite culture can be shown without any difficulty, be shown to parallel the social organization of the moon-worshipping Sabaeans from 1000 BC. One would not expect it to be identical, for the modern Yemen is the composite remnant of several earlier states, adapted by a shift in religion and by northern influences. Now, if this influence would impact Yemen down here, right, why would those northern influences, which came all the way from Greece and Rome and stuff down here, right? Why would they not impact what's happening here? Because they had to travel through here to get to here anyway. And there was constant communication across this region. So that would make sense, right? Any questions or comments so far? Have I missed anything? Okay, so let me know. Just tag my name, right? So we're speaking now of the moon god Sin. So his symbol was the crescent moon. Now, given the amount of artifacts concerning the worship of the moon god, it is clear that this was the dominant religion in Sumeria. Right, so now we're looking at Sumer. This is Babylon. This is Iraq. The cult of the moon god was the most popular religion throughout ancient Mesopotamia. And we've already spoken of the very strong links between Mesopotamia here and this whole region, from Oman all the way through, which was identical. The same religion that was here, and it may even have been sourced from Oman. So these guys might have traveled up here into there and taken the religion with them. So the Babylonian religion may have come from here rather than the other way around. There's that possibility. The Assyrians, the Babylonians, and Akkadians took the word Shwen and transformed it into the word Shin as their favorite name for this deity. That's from Austin Potts, The Hymns and Prayers of the Moon Gods. Right, this is his 1971 paper So this is a PhD scholar discussing this, right? So the god Sin is well known. And Sin is a name, essentially Sumerian in origin, which had been borrowed by the Semites. Okay, so Islam was obviously a Semitic religion. Or sorry, no. Arabic's a Semitic language and the whole Semitic culture, right? So they've borrowed the name Sin. So it's well known in the Semitic cultures. It was well known in Semitic language. So it's odd that Muslims can't seem to find out why the chapter, the most important chapter in the Quran, the heart of the Quran is called Yasin, right? Because maybe they're not looking hard enough. Now, Muhammad the Sabi, I've mentioned this before, but Muhammad was a Sabi. It was said about the Sabians of Iran that they used to make a yearly pilgrimage to the pyramids of Egypt, the Sabians of Haran. Let's have a look at the Sabians of Haran. Haran is up here, just over the Syrian border, just inside Turkey, about 15 or 18 kilometers. This, of course, is the region where Abraham lived, where his father was from. And, of course, this is where he worshipped pillars and statues prior to following Yahweh. Right, so now you've got this whole area out here. And, of course, this temple has Göbekli Tepe and numerous other temples, literally dozens of temples in this area, the oldest temples in the world, right? The oldest known temples in the world dedicated to the star Sirius, the star god, right? So now the Sabians of Iran used to make a yearly pilgrimage to the pyramids of Egypt. Now that's interesting. The pyramids of Egypt, now you're looking at somewhere out here, right? You're looking at somewhere out here. Now, these guys would make a pilgrimage all the way down into Egypt to the pyramids because they also trace their development to the Egyptian mystery religions. There's a connection there, which I haven't explored, but I know it exists. So you've got the Egyptian mystery religions linked to the Sabaean moon god religions. It was said about the Sabians of Iran, they used to make a yearly pilgrimage to Egypt. Maimonides says that the Sabians are remnants of the ancient Egyptian priests who practiced hieroglyphic magic, a system of language encoding that can engineer consciousness. It should be noted that I've mentioned again in other streams, and I've provided examples over and over before, that the Quran, according to the Sufis and other major scholars of Islam, what happens is that the Quran, those missing letters at the end of these alif, lam, mim, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti letters of the Quran, they have a system of language encoding that engineers consciousness, and that the Quran's words and letters are divided into earth, air, fire, water, moon, and sun letters, that it's actually magic. Andrew Martin says Muhammad's singing was considered magical. Word magic, yes, correct. I mean, this is a very strong Shah Na Na. That's why Islam has the Shah Na Na. Right? But, now it might all be speculation, but they believed it. Onomatomancy, correct. So you remember the term onomatomancy, exactly. Okay, look it up in the, actually, hold on, let me just go there. Let me just actually, onomatomancy. Notice onomatomancy is huruf. Huruf is the plural of ahruf. Ahruf is basically, this is the readings of the Quran that they was talking about. Okay, but now the reason that they don't seem to want to incantations. So exactly, incantations. You are 100% correct. Notice here, ahruf, readings of the Quran. Okay, huruf or ahruf, plural. Harf, singular, letter of the alphabet, a word. Articulation of the Arabic language, a Quranic reading. Notice, a Quranic reading, a dialect. Muslims love to go on about that. The correct meaning is ilm al-huruf, onomatomancy, a magical practice based on the occult properties of the letters of the alphabet and of the divine and angelic names which they form. So understand, this is all linked to Egyptian magic, Egyptian ritual. Tim Chapman, trance stuff, correct, 100% correct, right? And yeah, so this is correct. Understand, I've gone into depth on this, but I need to at some point dive into this. But yes, Islam, if you look at the Encyclopedia of Islam, if you look through the volumes of the Encyclopedia of Islam, it's like 40-50% of Islam is concerned with magic. Like half of the Encyclopedia of Islam is concerned with magic in Islam. Okay, so yeah, wow, Murray, thank you very much. I'm very grateful. Thank you for that donation. Much appreciated. Yeah, so on that point, so the Sabians, now Muhammad, it does say within Islamic text that Muhammad was a Sabian, which is obviously a Gnostic sect, right? So let's continue. Harf, Akhruf, letter of the alphabet, and I've just shown you this. Onomatomancy, a magical practice. This goes into much more depth, all right? Now, Thoth of ancient Egypt was a moon deity, though they had other deities who also served as moon deities, but Thoth equals Hermes Trismegistus, the father of Gnosticism. And I've just been doing a series on Thaddeus' channel. I've done 3 shows so far, which discusses the Gnostic elements of Islam, the Gnostic origins of Islam. Don't forget it's originally pagan, but then it adopts Gnosticism. That's why Sabaeans go to Islamic paradise. Yeah, people of the book. So Horse says they had magic from the west and controlling consciousness from the East India, something like that. It could be that India took its stuff from Mesopotamia. I don't know. What did that make Simon Magus? Simon Magus. So Hermes Trismegistus goes to he's linked to Egypt, right? So now the oldest inscriptions, okay, the oldest references and inscriptions to the tribe of the Israelites, oddly enough, are down here. Somewhere, I don't have the exact location, but the oldest inscription to the god Yahweh, right? The oldest mention in inscription of the god Yahweh is somewhere down here, oddly enough. Not here, okay? Not here, but in Africa. Weirdly enough, the oldest inscription to the name of the god Yahweh is here. So the Israelites were wandering around here, believe it or not, right? So basically you've got the Gnostic idea. So you originally had what we'd call quote unquote Jewish Gnosticism, which was the Egyptian mystery religion grafted onto Jewish beliefs. Then later, Gnosticism changes, it adapts, and now it grafts itself onto Christian beliefs. It tries to run with the cool kids. But what it's trying to do is it's trying to put this veneer of biblical, pseudo-biblical veneer on top of pagan beliefs. So it is complete mythology. And it's trying to put this veneer of this Judaic idea, then this Christian idea on top. So Simon Magus would have been like one of the early quote-unquote Christian Gnostics. And India, Yaakov says, has a very strong tradition of astrology and celestial worship. And, well, yeah, and of course so does, as we've just shown, very strongly, so does Islam, ultimately. And of course, we've shown that the Kaaba can be considered a megalith, and we'll have a look more at that. So, now in Da'if Bukhari, Volume 1, Book 7, Hadith 340, and also Volume 4, Book 56, Hadith 725, I have shown this before. Actually, so let me just go to Quran X. Oops. Right, if you go to QuranX.com, you go to search, we go to Hadiths, and I go to Sabi, right? So we go here. This is what I'm looking at here. Da'if Bukhari, Volume 4. Let's go have a look. Wrong one. Actually, no. This one. Here we go. Okay. She goes here. She asked where. They said to Allah's messenger, said, do you mean the man who was called the Sabi with the new religion? They said, yes, and they brought her to the Prophet. The Prophet was called the Sabi. The Sabi is the Sabaeans. 2 men took me to the man who was called the Sabi, right? That's in Da'if Bukhari, right? And of course, so the Sabaeans were remnants of the ancient Egyptian priests who practiced hieroglyphic magic, and they are linked to Gnosticism, as I've covered in my Gnostic series on Thaddeus' channel, which I'll repeat here at some point in the near future. So understand, Muhammad was apparently a Sabi. He was a Gnostic. He was a Sabaean. So, yeah, wasabi, exactly. Right. So now, Muhammad is the Sabi. The word Saba'a means the one who has deserted his old religion and embraced a new religion. That's interesting because it says in Da'if Bukhari, right, the one with a new religion, okay, and they brought it to the Prophet, the man who is called a Sabi. Right? And notice, by Allah, he is either the greatest magician, very fascinating, the greatest magician, right? The fact that this choice of words, the word Saba'a means the one who has deserted his old religion and embraced a new religion. And the Sabis are a sect of the people of the scripture who recite the book of Psalms. Now that's fascinating. A sect of people who recite, remember, these are fake Christians and fake Jews. I've discussed this at length in my series with Thaddeus. And I'll do this again. Now, if you've watched it yesterday and last week, you'd have seen that series where I go into depth in the Sabis and their connection to one of the very earliest Gnostic sects called the Al-Kasai. And of course, when you look at the Akhruf and the Qira'at, there is a reading of, if you look at the readings of the Quranic reading, there's one called Al-Qasai, which is also happens to be the oldest known Gnostic sect. So let's continue. So the Sabis are a sect of people who recite the book of Psalms. Now notice this is from the Encyclopedia of the Quran. The Quran provides the Sabaeans with a religious status comparable to that of Jews and Christians. They were heretical Jews and Christians. Now, the Sabaeans, as we know, are Gnostics. They are pseudo-biblical. And of course, if Muhammad was a Sabi and the Sabaeans were of the same status as Jews and Christians, then they were heretical Jews and Christians. So he's a magic man, yeah. So, from the book Tamara M. Green's The City of the Moon God, Religious Traditions of Haran. Again, Haran is up here, just over the border in Turkey from the border of Syria. Since star worship played such an important role in the ancient pre-Islamic religion of the Haranians, the term Sabian came to be applied as a generic term for star worshipper or even pagan. So now we've got additional sources that are telling us that these Sabians were star worshippers and pagans, but yet the Quran thinks they're people of the book. So these were neither Jews nor Christians nor pagan, in the middle. Correct, Yaakov, you remembered that. I wonder how much of this is known by average Abdul. Yesterday on the chat with, yesterday in the series as we did this with the other show with Thaddeus, a whole bunch of them came in. They're aware of this. I believe the scholars know this. Okay. Yeah, well, Anil, I'm glad you're taking note. Please capture screenshots if you want. And guys, look, if any of you are curious about this, I can set up a stream. We can do a Zoom call, and you can ask questions. We can go through this. So I can try and teach you guys what this is, where the sources are, and stuff like that. Okay, now, Allah the Moon God. So let's try and finish this. So I'm near the end, I hope, because I feel like I've been doing this for about millions of years now. Yeah, so Allah the Moon God. Now, again, it's very hard to trust every source. It's very hard to fact check every fact. And sometimes I will use sources that I don't necessarily believe the source. I don't necessarily like the source. But like a stopped clock, they can be right twice a day. Right? So when they write, they're right. I mean, I think that Bart Ehrman's a complete hack. But when Bart Ehrman is correct, Bart Ehrman is correct. Right? At times is actually very useful. So, hello, Clayt. Welcome. So this would almost be directly from the scriptures, the ones who pretend to be Jews but are not. And that is true. Actually, let's have a look at the... yeah, let's actually have a look. Yeah, let's have a look here. I'm going to go to the King James Bible Online and Revelation 2, 6 to 10. Revelation 2. Yeah, so notice though that most people will constantly use Revelation 3:9 and Revelation 2:9 to literally spout hatred about the Jews, which is something I'm not happy about. And I think you guys know my stand on that. And if you are going to get that way in the comments, I will ban your ass immediately without thinking. Believe me. I have zero patience for that kind of nonsense. But they will try to twist the meaning of the Revelations 2:9 and 3:9. For instance, I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. People take this to say that the Jews are the synagogue of Satan, that the Jews are Satanists, the Jews are evil, and Christians must hate the Jews. Therefore it is right to murder the Jews. I've seen this from supposed quote-unquote Christians. Now, do understand, Revelation chapter 2, verse 6, but this thou hast, that thou hatest the deeds of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate. This is speaking about a Gnostic heretical sect called the Nicolaitans. This is speaking about a bunch of heretics, exactly like the Al-Qasai and all the other groups that were pseudo-biblical. They were simply lying about following the Bible. They were simply adopting Jewish and Christian beliefs, inverting them, completely destroying them, and yet claiming to be Christians, claiming to be Jews. Right? They were heretics. They were known to be heretics at the time. So, and I know the blasphemy of them, which is the Nicolaitans, who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Because, as we've shown in other shows I've done, Gnosticism is very much in line with Satanism. All right, so enough on that. And as I said, if I see any unfounded, now look, if you want to criticize the Jews because of very good reason, that's fine. I do so as well. I've mentioned this before. Jesus made criticism of the Pharisees. But if you're going to start doing Adam Green level nonsense, right, I will ban your ass immediately. I'm not even engaging in discussion with you. So why is Allah never defined in the Quran? And that's a good question. Why did Muhammad assume that the pagan Arabs already knew who Allah was? Now that's a very good question. Why? Muhammad was raised in the religion of the moon god Allah, which is the fact he was consecrated by his grandfather to Hubal, to Baal, right? Baal was the Allah of the Kaaba, right? But he went one step further than his fellow pagan Arabs. While they believed that Allah, the moon god, was the greatest of all gods and the supreme deity in a pantheon of deities, Muhammad decided that Allah was not only the greatest God, but the only God. So this is now a different article published by an author here. And of course, this agrees with Kuhn, the archaeologist, who states that, no, he just rolled all the gods up into one and called it Allah and went on with his way, right? In effect, he said, look, you already believe that the moon god Allah is the greatest of all gods. All I want you to do is accept the idea that he is the only God. I'm not taking away the Allah you already worship. I'm only taking away his wife, his daughters, and all the other gods. This is seen from the fact that the first point of the Muslim creed is not Allah is great, but Allah is the greatest. Correct. This is very strange. Greatest of who? Of which gods? What pantheon? He is the greatest among the gods. Pardon me. So yeah, Andrew, feel free to post your links in the comments. I mean, there's some interesting stuff there. So yeah, any comments, any thoughts while I'm at this? Hopefully I'm going at a good pace and not too slow and not too fast. So, so wokeism is the latest incarnation of Gnosticism. I mean, it's quite blunt. All right, let's continue. So the question is, why would Muhammad, I mean, Muhammad technically is Allah at this point, but why would Muhammad say that Allah is the greatest except in a polytheistic context? So the Arabic word is used in contrast to the greater from the lesser. Don't forget, Kabir is greater. Technically, he's saying Allahu Akbar, which Allah is bigger. My rock is bigger than your rock, right? That this is true is seen from the fact that the pagan Arabs never accused Muhammad of preaching a different Allah than the one they already worshipped. This Allah was the moon god according to all of the archaeological evidence. We've proven that, hands down. There is no dispute here. This Allah was the moon god according to all the archaeological evidence, and Muhammad attempted to have it both ways. To the pagans, he said that he still believed in the moon god Allah. To the Jews and Christians, he said that Allah was their God too. But both the Jews and Christians knew better, and this is why they rejected his Allah God as a false God. Now, Al-Kindi, one of the early Christian apologists against Islam, pointed out that Islam and its God Allah did not come from the Bible, but oddly, Al-Kindi tells us it came from the paganism of the Sabaeans. Again, we've got another link to the Sabaeans. We're just constantly coming around in circles to the Sabaeans. They did not worship the God of the Bible, but the moon god and his daughters Al-Uzza, Allat, and Manat. Dr. Newman concludes that his study of the early Christian-Muslim debates by stating, Islam proved itself to be a separate and antagonistic religion which has sprung up from idolatry. Islamic scholar Caesar Farah concluded there is no reason therefore to accept the idea that Allah passed to the Muslims from the Christians and the Jews. And there is no evidence for this, simply because the entire Christology of Islam within the Islamic text is entirely Gnostic and heretical. It is not orthodox by any means. So Andrew Martin, yeah, that's exactly right. He's trying to join Allah to Christian and Jewish Yahweh. So guys, I mean, this is my 25th installment of this show. I've done various short, like 2-3 minute videos. I've done 5-minute videos, and I've done these longer talks. And I could have done this much quicker. I could have compressed it into 6 to 8 hours. I've taken a lot more time. But given what you've seen so far, does this make a coherent case? Is this a coherent argument that Islam is most certainly taken from Southern Arabian paganism, from Yemeni paganism, that it is most certainly the worship of the moon god Al-Makka, who happens to be the god of Arabia, as well as the god of Babylon, right? Does this make a coherent argument? Or am I just simply, is this just a fantasy of mine that I'm drawing false conclusions from all of this evidence? I mean, because there's just overwhelming evidence that points in one direction to me only. Make a book. Yeah, I know I should make several books at this point. Yeah. Okay, City of the Moon. So this, I'm not going to dwell too much on this. This is in Iraq. Lives in a temple. Okay, so lives in, it was the house of sin. Okay, so is the city of the moon. The god lives in a temple. It is the house of Shin. Okay, he was the Allah of the temple, the God of the temple. Now notice, there is no differentiation between the male moon god and the moon. They're effectively the same, right? It's the incarnation. The moon is the incarnation of the male moon god. Sumerians used a lunar calendar with 360 days. Same like the Islamic lunar calendar. The moon god is referred to as a bull. Okay, it's an agricultural fertility god, and we've covered at length that Al-Makka has a bull as one of his symbols, right? The horns are the crescent, and we've mentioned they have a lunar calendar of 360 days, that the god is male. So this is again just evidence from Mesopotamia, right? And the crescent is horizontal in their latitude, so you've got a horizontal crescent in that latitude, and of course, as you move across to different, as you move south, the moon starts to go from like this, the moon starts to do that. Okay, so that's city of the moon. Now, from the term Ailia to Allah, prostration to idols, Charles Russell Coulter and Patricia Turner consider that Allah's name may be derived from a pre-Islamic god called Ailia, which is similar to El, Il, Ilah, or Jehovah. Now, they considered some of his characteristics based on lunar deities like Al-Makka, Qal, Shakr, Wad, to love, to agree, and Warak. Interesting. Now, Andrew, earlier you mentioned that Waraka might be the god of Muhammad, right? That whatever, but notice Waraka. Okay, so Waraka, remember, he was like the so you said there's a rumor that he's the father of Muhammad, right? But he was also the monk at the well that told Muhammad that he was supposedly the Christian, right? Heretical Christian that told Muhammad he was receiving revelation from God. So Warak is one of the names of the pagan gods, and it also happens to be Waraka, whose family name happens to be also linked to the pagan gods. His father, Waraka's father was a pagan god. Warak and Waraka, exactly. It's the same name, because if you look at his father happens to be also linked to the pagan gods like Manat and Al-Uzza, so they're all part of the same pantheon. An exceptional rep, so let me see. Anela, you said, wow, what is it that you are? I'd like to know what it is people are, what is most striking to people in specific, so I can, if I need to, dig deeper into some things, that really striking to people, especially, I'm not a Muslim, so, except when Muslims are telling me that they're ex-Christians, I'll have to claim that I'm an ex-Muslim. I was a professor at Al-Azhar before I found Christianity, whatever. But you guys might see something that I miss because you have a cultural context I don't have. So an exceptional representation of some South Arabian god was found on the low reliefs decorating the pillars of a temple in the Wadi al-Juf in the northernmost region of Yemen, dating back to the 8th century BC. A caption identifies each divine image, and the masculine figure of Wad is represented standing, armed with arch and quiver, wearing a short skirt and a horned headgear. So here's a question. You've got the god Wad, and then you've got Nimrod, and you've got similar ideas, the horned god. This, of course, would be the way that they represented Alexander the Great. So if anyone knows more about this, the masculine figure of a warrior armed with an arch and a quiver. Okay, what does that remind you of? Let me know. Drop that note. And also, please, guys, if you do like what I'm doing, please leave a like. Obviously, if you have not subscribed, please do subscribe. But also leave a comment down below later, just for the algorithm. Just say hello. Let me know what you had for breakfast. Whatever it is, but do leave a comment. Do you think Nimrod was technically an atheist? I have no idea. I honestly have no idea. And yeah, so let us continue. A scene from the Flintstones. They take on a lodge meeting. Yeah, right. So in pre-Islamic Arabia, including in Mecca, Allah was considered a deity, possibly a creator or supreme deity in polytheistic pantheon. That's fine. So we know that Allah was Hubal, Baal, right? Muhammad is consecrated to Baal at the Kaaba. Allah from Arabic Al-Illah, meaning the God, was a title. Wellhausen tells us that Allah was known from Jewish and Christian sources and was known to pagan Arabs as the supreme God. Welcome, Dragon. Good to see you. Farish, are you around as well? Good grief, I missed you. Welcome. Welcome, Scottish, wearing a kilt. Yes. Farish, you always have the best comments. Sometimes you win the internet, with those comments. So the worship of sacred stones was one of the most important practices of Arabs. Cult images of a deity were most often an unworked stone block. We'll look at those now. The most common name for these stone blocks was derived from the Semitic nasib, to be stood upright. But other names were used, such as Nabatean Masgida, place of prostration, and Arabic duwar, object of circumambulation. So the idea of the circumambulation of the Kaaba was originally a pagan practice of going around a stone idol, which is what they do today, but also nasib, to be stood upright. This takes us back to the Islamic word Hanif, right, which is upright, which means upright idols. Abraham was Hanif. Allah is Hanif, upright idol, right? Abraham was supposedly a Hanif. Muhammad is Hanif, upright idol. So now let's continue. So what does this have to do with Ishmael? So let's have a quick look. Ishmael worshipped idols. Sarah did not want Isaac adopting these habits, right? So he also violated married women. So Ishmael worshipped idols and he violated married women, and Sarah did not want Isaac. That's why she wanted to get rid of Isaac. He tried to kill, okay? So Ishmael tried to kill Isaac with his bow and arrow while making it look like an accident. So hold on, now you've got Isaac, he's got a bow and arrow. Now we just had this god, okay? We just had this pagan god with a bow and arrow, right? So Ishmael was quarreling with Isaac about the inheritance, saying, I'm the firstborn and will therefore take a double portion. They went into the field, and Ishmael, took his bow and shot arrows at him, Isaac, just as you say, as a madman who casteth firebrands, arrows, and death, and says, I am only mocking. So this is referred to, obviously, in Jewish texts, right? It's referred to in Proverbs. So this is a reference within the Jewish text to Proverbs 26:18-19, and Genesis Rabbah 53:11. This would be... Let me bring this up for you. Let me see if I can find this. Let me see if I can find this on Bereshit Rabbah 53:11. And Sarah, so this is on Safari.org, and Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, so making sport. Now, sport refers to nothing else but sexual immorality. So basically, Ishmael, within the Jewish works, he is guilty of sexual immorality. Does that surprise anybody? Right? And of course, he seduced married women and dishonored them. So this is within the Talmud literature, right? And let's see about the arrows. And Ishmael said to Isaac, let us go and see our pieces in the field, and would pick up the bow and arrow, shooting in Isaac's direction while pretending to be playing, as it is written. So basically, within the Jewish scriptures as well, we learn that he was like a wild man, right? He was a bad man. So hopefully, let me get back to your guys' comments, because I need to go find where I was. Okay, so God cut short Abraham's life by 5 years, so he would not live to see his grandson violate a betrothed woman, commit murder, deny God, deny the resurrection of the dead, and despise his birthright. What is fascinating is that Muslims claim to be descended from Ishmael, and of course the Jewish legends of Ishmael, which precede, right, the Muslims, right, precede the Muslim stories, tell us the man was licentious, he was murderous, he was a cheat, he was evil. I mean, isn't this fascinating that Muslims don't tell us this aspect of Ishmael? So, Anila, yeah, that is, unfortunately, Muslims don't know. He said, I thought I was done with shock effects after all I know so far, and I didn't know when I was Muslima. But yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's so much to Islam we have not yet uncovered. I think there's so much still to be uncovered. I need to look into the magic in Islam. I mean, the practice of magic is huge in Islam. It's enormous, you know. So Ishmael was trying to have sexual games with his small brother, according to some Hebrew texts. Yeah, I mean, so the man was, you know, a little bit Mohammedan, right? I'm seriously, I mean, I'm basically doing this in crayon already. How can I dumb it down more for the, you know, for them? Maldolini, welcome. Good to see you. Right, now, an angel told Hagar before Ishmael was born that he would be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren, right? And he became an expert archer, so yeah. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. So now we've got this overlap. Somehow there's this connection to this God, this evil God, who was also someone with bows and arrows. Right, let's look at Wad, Rahmanan, and Hiran. The place Hiran, of course. We've mentioned Rahmanan before. This is Hiran up here in Turkey. But notice there's also Hiran here in Yemen. So the same name, because these are the same people, the same ideas. And they simply, so this idea traveled up here. Right, so Hiran, worshipping the same God, the same religious views, but they've taken that. It's like making New York, you know, and then going somewhere else, like New London or New York. So you'll find someone goes from London, founds a city in America called New London, right? Now, the Routledge Encyclopedia of Ancient Mediterranean Religions, let's have a look. And Rahmanan, as we know, is the old Jewish and Christian name for God, right, for Yahweh, and of course the Muslims borrowed that. And don't forget that in the first 50 chapters of the Quran, Allah is called Rahman, Rahmanan. Now, Wad or Wadum is a major South Arabian divinity whose name is linked to the Semitic root Wad, to love and to agree. Now, even in an inscription invoking the sole god Rahmanan, the well-attested formula Wad is father is added. Now, that's unusual. So the pagans borrowed the name. So before Muhammad, so Christianity comes into Arabia. The Christians and the Jews call Yahweh Rahman, right? And then, of course, the pagans start to make a competing god. They make a competing Jesus figure and they make a competing Jehovah figure, right? We've already covered that previously in other shows, how they made a competing god of salvation, which was not part and parcel of their beliefs until Jesus was now being preached. Then, of course, you've got Rahman, which, again, the Quran uses for the first 50 chapters before Muhammad realizes, oops, I'm using the Jewish name for God. I better switch over to, I'll call him Allah. What the heck? But, of course, the word Rahman was also used by the pagans, and Wad was father, right, is added. So Rahmanan, Wad is father. So Rahmanan is Wad, but Wad is the father god. Very interesting that they borrowed the idea of God, the father. The cult of Wad was mainly spread in Al-Jawf area, northwest Yemen, and in the Sabaean territories. And there were several temples and priests devoted to local worship. Sabaean territories, that's Yemen. 2 temples of Wad are attested also beyond the borders of South Arabia, in the oases of Qaryat al-Faw and the Dan. Qaryat al-Faw happens to be right here. This still exists today. There's a little town here. This was the capital at one time. When these guys invaded Arabia and controlled all of Arabia, the Yemenis settled here. And don't forget, they were a highly literate culture. There is no reason that under Muhammad, Arabia should have been illiterate, because it was a highly literate culture. Lots of writing was going on, multiple languages, huge amounts of trade. There's a vote. Thank you. In the only South Arabian incantation text, now someone mentioned incantations earlier. Okay. Inscribed in cursive script on a wooden stick, the author asked the god for protection from evil, and he curses an enemy. And the new moon, Sakhran, okay, in whose darkness the author of the text hides, is found in inscriptions an epithet of the god Wad. And they speak of Hiran, the watercourse of Wad, and the symbol of the god is a snake. Hiran, the watercourse of Wad. Now, of course, that takes us back to Hiran here, which is linked to Hiran there. Up here, Haran, which is where Abraham supposedly comes from. Right? Now, you've got Wad, who's the father god, God the Father, which is just really odd. So just, again, I don't always have there's so much evidence that needs to be connected. I wish scholars would take the time to look at this stuff and say, hold on, how does this all connect? But within this region, you had these ideas that were flowing. And of course, Hiran is majorly important in the context of Islam. That's where that's where Abraham came from. So is an incantation. It's a call to success. So yeah. Okay, this is a 9,000-year-old shrine in Jordan. So you've got Jibal al-Kashabiyah, right? Archaeologists have made a unique discovery. So this is what a graven idol looks like. And I've mentioned this before. This is Wadi al-Jafar. This is Petra. Notice it's about 100 kilometers or less from Petra, right there, just to the east of Petra. These are graven idols, right? This is what graven idols look like. You can see these here. Right, this is 9,000 years old. So once again, we're talking about Petra, you're talking about graven idols. This idea goes way back. This is long before Islam. Now, as we wind down, let me see, I don't have that many slides left. So what are you guys taking away from this? I mean, what are the important things? Okay, yeah, we have like 3 slides to go. So what are the main things you're taking away from this? Because we'll be finishing this shortly. So a lot of those in the Jordan Valley, yeah, they may well be, but that's just the one I had pictures of. Yeah, I couldn't find much more. The snake, dragon, Satan. Actually, Kijane Hamilton, yeah, the snake, dragon, Satan, again, just saying, yeah, the snake always wanted to be God. Now, oddly, yeah, why is that the snake? I mean, why is that the snake? And yes, if you go back to older sects, again, you come back to the snake. So an illiterate Muhammad is just a polemic to answer the complaint that he copied from everyone and was inspired instead. There is no real evidence for this. Yeah, I mean, even within the hadiths, he wants to write. He writes things, right? So I believe that I agree that it seems to be an excuse to say that he must have been inspired by Allah talking directly into his brain, right? Rather than copying and reading stuff. So yeah, I mean, but this is all copied. This is all borrowed. These ideas all borrowed. So how close to Petra, yet Muslims claim Jesus was Muslim. Yeah. Let me see anything. Okay, now let's think about Canopus, Alpha Carinae, okay, Hans and Janub. So Lunas, let's go back to the moon. Now, since we're talking about monotheism, back to the moon. Lunas is an Egyptian deity known as Hans Lunas, and represented as hawk-headed, surrounded by a crescent and disk. Now, we've mentioned earlier that these guys would go to Egypt to go walk around the Kaaba. The pyramids, the original Kaaba was, and I did mention the connections to the Kaaba and the pyramids very early in the episodes, like episode 2 or 3. I spoke about that already, maybe episode 1, right? Links to Egypt, links to the pyramids. Now, a crescent and disk, the idea of the crescent and disk goes back to Egypt, and there's lots of hints from the Sabaeans as well that they are part of the Egyptian religion. So the crescent and disk is not a new idea. So Islam is going back to the original Egyptian mystery religions, then through paganism, and then, borrowing from Gnosticism and then pretending to be whatever it is. Okay? Now, so lustration is a religious rite practiced by the ancients. It consists in washing the hands and sometimes the whole body in water. It was intended as a symbol of the internal purification of the heart, a ceremony preparatory to initiation in all of the ancient mysteries. Now, there's a religion that practices daily washing, at least of the hands and as well as other parts of the body. Where does it get this? Because this, remember, we mentioned in the show I did with Thaddeus that the Baptists, the Gnostic Baptists who baptized themselves sometimes daily, this eventually transformed within the Islamic context into ablution or washing. So baptism became washing. Islam is about ablution, right? So these are guys are washing. And notice, a symbol of the internal purification of the heart. Now, one, you've got the physical washing, which is something Islam does, the ablution. 2, there's the story. We all know the story of the angels who come to Muhammad, cut him open, literally take out his heart and wash his heart in a golden bowl filled with ice water. They wash his heart. So now they're trying to one-up the Egyptian mystery religions because you've got this ritual washing, whereas Muhammad had a literal washing. He's a one better than these gods. He's one better than these former religions. He goes the actual full hog. So understand, I hope you guys can see that to me there seems to be a connection here. What do you guys think? Baptize your nasal passages? Of course. Yes, Villainous. Baptize them. So yes, they misunderstood what baptism means. Surprising, I know they don't understand, so they make something up. That's what Gnosticism is. You make it up as you go along. Okay? Washing, there's practically no water in Mecca. That's another interesting point, except water came out of Muhammad's fingers in lakes and rivers. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so let me continue. Right, now we speak of the southern star Canopus. Now, we've mentioned already previously the second brightest star in the sky, and how the Kaaba is actually oriented on both the moon and the sun, right, at the equinox. It is also oriented on the four winds, and it's also oriented on, so it's an astronomical megalith, and it's also oriented on the rising of the second brightest star in the sky, right? Andrew Martin makes a very good point. It's why the Quran is repetitive, successive refinement. Now, they speak of Osiris Hans, okay? And the gods Ptah and Min. Min is a pagan god, and of course the Muslims were originally called the Menin. They call themselves the Menin, right? Muk is just a prefix, the servants of, or the slaves of, the people of, right? The slaves of. But the Min is what the Jews called them, pagans, the worshippers of pagan gods. And here you've got an Egyptian god called Min. So these are some of the simple links to Egypt. Now we know that this goes through the Sabaeans, right? And we know that Muhammad is supposedly a Sabaean. And of course, they've all been run to earth in 3 stars: Canopus, Capella, and Spica. So Canopus. And of course, they speak of the horns and disc marking a rising star. The horns and the disc, the crescent and the disc mark a rising star. And what does Islam have as a symbol? The horns and a disc, right? The disc was the star. One of Allah's attributes is Al-Mu'minin. Correct, and I've mentioned that before. The meaning of Mu'minin. Notice how Muslims avoid to talk about Petra, of course, yeah. Mecca's got to get water pumped in from Jeddah to properly fill the Zamzam well. Now, I actually designed a security system to protect that water inlet, because they take water in, and I don't think they actually bought it and actually implemented it, but I designed a system for that, to actually protect it from sabotage. Way back in the day, I actually went out there. I've actually been out to that area a few times. So yeah, I had to design a radar system coupled to cameras real-time tracking to look for people on boats, especially coming in at night, possibly even swimmers coming in to try to sabotage the water inlets. They take it from the seawater and they process it and pump it through. So I was asked to design a system for that back in the day. Okay, right. Now, let's look at Gerald S. Hawkins and David A. King. This is the Kaaba. Now, the Kaaba is nominally lined east, north, south, east, west, right? Now, this wall here of the Kaaba is the setting point of the 3 stars of the handle of the plow. Remember, we spoke at length previously of the astronomical orientation, the fact that that Islam is very much an astronomical religion, right? And it has a huge amount of astronomical symbolism. And this wall is aligned to the summer sunrise. This one is aligned to the winter sunset, and here's the rising point of Canopus, aligned to the stars. And the alignment of the Kaaba is implied by the first section of the text illustrated in Figure 1. But notice it is also aligned to the winds. So it is not only astronomical or astrological, it is meteorological as well. This is a common pagan practice. It's the same as at Stonehenge and numerous other megaliths around Europe. So the first of the winds is the Sabah, which is easterly of the Kaaba, facing the wall between the Blackstone and the southern corner. It blows between summer, sunrise, and the rising point of Canopus. The second is the Janub, which is southerly. It blows from the rising blah, blah, blah. Then you've got the 3 stars of the handle of the plow, which is the Shamal, and northerly and blows and blah, blah, blah. But understand, the archaeology of the Kaaba marks it as an astrological megalith. Right? So, Yemen. Yemen until its fall under Arabian rule. So the Yemeni people, so the final couple of slides, Yemeni people were a mixture of Jewish and Christians by this time, together with a mixture of adherents of indigenous beliefs. The last Himyarite king, Du Nawas, Yusuf Asaf Yatar, converted supposedly to Judaism. Whether he was Orthodox or heretical, that remains to be seen. Right? I don't think he was Orthodox Jewish at all. And subsequently ordered a massacre of Christians. Survivors called for help from the Byzantine emperor in the name of Aksumite Christians of Yemen. This enabled the Aksumites to dominate Yemen and even threaten to control the area around Mecca and Medina. Don't forget, Aksum was the first Christian kingdom here in Africa. Right? So, in return, the Himyarites called the Persian Empire for help, which led to the absorption of Yemen into Persia. So the Persians decided, okay, well, fine, we'll just come over and take over. Subsequently, the Yemen came to be governed by the Umayyad Caliphate in Damascus and afterwards by the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. Now, this author, Jean Dorès, had written in the secret books of the Egyptian Gnostics. Hey, we've got Egyptian Gnostics now. Seth is known in Islam and usually assimilated to Agatha-daimon, who's one of the great figures of Hermetic literature. So Seth in Islam becomes one of the great figures of Hermetic literature. And we just mentioned now that Hermes Trismegistus is like the first Gnostic, the creator of Gnosticism, and he is an Egyptian figure associated with Thoth. The prophetic prestige with which the Gnostics endowed for him, he still possesses, especially in the traditions of various Shiite groups. Hold on, the prophetic prestige with which the Gnostics endowed Seth, okay, remains especially in various Shiite groups, therefore chiefly in Mesopotamia or in Iran. And in these particular doctrines, the survival of Gnostic themes is ubiquitous and seems immense. So now you've got this idea of the Egyptian Gnostics and Seth, and I've mentioned before that Seth is raised because of within the Ethiopian tradition, within their Bible, they obviously have this very strong respect for Seth and Enoch. And of course, the Mandaeans, the Sabians, they have a great respect for Enoch. And in fact, the existing Mandaeans, who are today the surviving Sabians, they worship Enoch, they hate Jesus. So again, you've got these links, these Gnostic links to this, which is linked to Islam. So now I think this is my very final slide. So has this been making sense so far? Right? Do let me know. So, such passages may well detail the practices of residents of pagan Taif, which is just 87 kilometers from Mecca. In fact, most of the Quran's agricultural references require a locale no further afield than Taif, famous for its grapes, its pomegranates, its figs, etc. Only olives would require the growing conditions found in Yemen and Nabatea. So now, Mari Sweet, thank you. Pretty sensible. Now, have a look at this. Taif, this is Mecca here. Taif is right here, just outside of Mecca. I've been to Taif. Okay, I've actually been to Taif for work. I actually went and did a survey out there. I designed a system as well for an industrial installation out there. So I spent time out there, spent a few days. They wouldn't let me leave until I finished this job. But notice, they say here that this area fits all of the agricultural aspects of the Quran's description of Mecca, and that only olives would require what Yemen can provide, as well as Petra. So notice, Yemen satisfies all the needs that Petra does. And of course, this area has far more links to Muhammad than does Petra. And there's another reason why also that's important, which we'll discuss shortly. So at either end of only olives would require the growing conditions found in Yemen and Nabatea at either end of Western Arabia's overland trade route. Thus, almost everything in the Quran's early surahs is compatible with its Hijazi origins. So now we don't have to go necessarily so far outside. So let's have a look here. This is Taif. Okay, it's actually quite green, has lots of mountains, lots of room for caves. Right, so it actually would fit a lot of that's Taif over here, right, just southeast of Mecca. And of course, this is the kind of region we're looking at, and it's a very popular tourism destination. Right, I've driven out here; it's actually pretty funky, but look how green it can be. So it satisfies a lot of the discussion around the Quran, right, about what the Quran looked like with water and all of these things. I'll just bring up my okay. So the presence now. So just to repeat, almost everything, so this place, Taif, satisfies almost everything in the Quran's early surahs as compatible with its Hijazi origins. So what if there is a link to that Taif and they just moved it to Mecca to start on a blank slate? But revisionists must reckon with two other facts which argue against Islam's Nabatean origins. So there's a common... Desvold, thank you. So now, this is my final slide, but this is the last point I want to end off with. Lots of people point up here to Petra, to Nabatea. Maybe I should have a little chat with Mal about this as well. Everyone speaks of Petra, so does Jay Smith, right? They speak of Petra up here in the north and its connections to Islam. But as I believe we have a much stronger case for going south, right? And within Arabia, going south, this whole region here, okay? And this is why we also have to go west into Africa. This is written by a Muslim scholar. Okay, I took these facts from a Muslim scholar who's writing a paper on this. And there are two facts which argue against Islam's Nabatean origins, so not Petra. Andrew Martin, I know you're a Petra fan, but there's much better information pointing south and west. There's the presence of 200 Amharic and Ethiopic loanwords in the Quran. So there's over 200 Ethiopic words in the Quran. Remember, of the 50 plus languages that are included in the Quran and over 2,000 words, more than 10% of those are Ethiopic. Right? Dan Boy, thank you. Yeah. And notice the Quranic references to pagans' idol worship and animal sacrifice. So the Quranic references to the pagans' idol worship and animal sacrifice. Significant linguistic borrowing suggests extensive cross-cultural interaction. When goods and ideas are exchanged, words often are as well. And we discussed that in depth. We discussed a lot of the history and so on and the archaeology that proves this, right? Cultural dominance may play into the linguistic borrowing also. And Ethiopia ruled the Hejaz for a time during the 6th century. In fact, for longer than there was a couple of years, there's like hundreds of years where that region. So there are hundreds of years when these guys ruled over the whole of Arabia, right? They controlled the whole of Inner Arabia. But notice the last point is here. If the Quran's early surahs, and don't forget, surah does not mean chapter. Surah means a degree, as in, if you are a Freemason, you have the first degree, the second degree, a 33rd degree Mason. Surah means degree. Get that? Make a note of that. Surah means degree, a degree of knowledge. It is not a chapter. We love to translate it as chapter, and they love for us to mistranslate it as well. It means a degree. If the Quran's early surahs were addressed to the inhabitants of Petra, right? If the Quran was being written to the inhabitants of Petra, Andrew, let me know what you think, right? If the Quran was written to the inhabitants of Petra, then, as the author tells us, one might expect more Coptic than Amharic and Ethiopian loanwords, right? So the Coptics are out here. The Coptics are all in this region, right? In the Sinai, Egypt, all right? So actually, let's go find Cairo. Okay, so Cairo, Egypt is right there. So he says, if this whole story is addressed, if the whole story of the Quran is addressed to these guys, we'd expect to find Coptics, because these guys are right next door. If it came from Petra, we'd expect a lot of Coptic words. The problem is we don't have Coptic words, right? We would expect to find more Coptic than Amharic and Ethiopic loanwords, since Nabatea was much closer culturally to Egypt than to Ethiopia. Let's have a look. Cairo here, Nabatea here, right? Petra right there. And of course, this is Ethiopia all the way down here. Now, he says, yet Amharic and Ethiopic words in the Quran stand in a 20-to-1 ratio to Coptic words. Why is it that if we're talking about Petra, we have barely any words from that region, yet we've got 20 words, Coptic origin, yet we've got over 200 Ethiopic words, okay? Over 200 Ethiopic words. And I have shown you this before, and I have mentioned this before. But what is critical, the term Tawhid for the oneness of Allah, right? The oneness of Allah. Technically, it is the unity of Allah, right? Technically, the unity of Allah. That word does not come from the Egyptian, okay? The word Tawhid is borrowed, okay? This word is borrowed from the Ethiopic language. Okay, the Ethiopic church, it's borrowed from literally from the Ethiopic church. The Ethiopic church is called the Orthodox Ethiopic Tawahedo Church. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tawahedo Church, the Church of the Unity of God. They are strong Trinitarians. They are Trinitarians. The word Tawhid that Islam borrowed is taken from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So understand, this refers to the Trinity of God. And the Muslims borrowed it to call it the oneness of God. But they borrowed it specifically. Why would they take that important word? Not from the Coptic, not from the Egyptian, but from the Ethiopians. Yes, there's fault. Tawhid is literally taken from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The first hijrah was to Ethiopia. They spent 15 years there with the Ethiopian Christians who protected them, right? Then they joined Muhammad in Mecca. So understand, I have discussed this in the past. I've done it in other episodes, maybe the one prior to this. I discussed it at length. I showed you the sources on that, but this is an Ethiopic word. So they even moved verses around in surahs, yeah. So understand, so this is where I believe we end, okay, my monotheism presentation. But, yeah. So, yeah, this is monotheism done. So, yeah, they steal everything, Tim. So, Andrew, I mean, why, if they are coming from Petra, do they not have Coptic words? Why are they 10 times more Ethiopic words? And this critical word that is not in the Quran, in fact, the Tawhid, right? This is taken from the Ethiopic Orthodox Church. It's taken from Africa, not taken from Egypt. So, yeah, guys, hopefully now any questions, I'll stay on for a few minutes and you guys can ask me your questions. But I do appreciate the great questions on the company. So how many degrees has Islam? Because some Masonic rites have 33 or 20. Okay, well, think about this. The Gnostic Gospel of James, I think, this is the Gospel of James. Gnostic Gospel of Thomas has 114 chapters. Isn't it odd that the Quran has 114 chapters? The Tawhid is also in the Mandaean Holy Book. Yes, of course, because they stole everything Christian, of course. And of course, Mandaeanism eventually become, well, Mandaean is originally from Al-Qasai. You've got the Ebionites, who are the Essenes, who are the Mandaeans, who are the Manichaeans, right? Well, the Manichaeans who become the Mandaeans. And yeah, so, and of course, there's a link to Islam there, which separated itself like in the 7th, 8th, or 9th century, somewhere around there. So, yeah, let's see. Have I missed anything? Thank you, Dragon. Petra's 100% Christian, but the link to Ethiopia is totally logical. Yeah. It's also completely under-researched and overlooked. It disguises the progress of mind, the development of the revelations. Yeah. Kagito, so keep pointing comments and other channels to watch these vids. Yeah, guys, I appreciate the support and, the recommendations. What would be the best chapter to read in the Reliance of the Traveler about slavery? Okay, so on that question, how about the Gnostic Gospel of Garfunkel? We should write it if it doesn't exist, Tim. So within the Reliance, they have removed everything on slavery, which they've said is supposedly defunct, which is not true because it has never been abolished in Islam. So give me a moment. We have to bring up, this is big, it's loading. Okay. If you want to cover slavery, you have to go to the Hidayah. Okay. If you want to cover slavery, you need to go to the Hidayah. This is like 4 volumes. 2,650 plus pages, if I counted correctly. So this is where you have to go. This is the big book, okay? And let me see. You need to go here. This is volume 2. You'll have to go to one of the other volumes to discuss slavery. There's different aspects because slavery falls under commerce, under sale, right? Because a slave is just an object. It's property. A slave is property, so it just has a financial value. So the book of slaves, this is on the book of punishment, on the law. This is on the punishment of slaves that abscond, what you do. don't forget, a dhimmi is technically also a slave. He's also a prisoner of war, right? And but you need to look in the Hidayah. It could be volume 1. I'd have to actually, let me go to Hidayah volume 1 just while we are here now. So let me bring up the Hidayah, volume 1. I hope it's in volume 1. I shall now bring up volume 1. Let's have a look. Okay, so something like 20% of the Islamic law is concerned with slavery. And they speak at length about, okay, here you go. Here we go. Fugitive slaves, sale, licensed slaves. They speak of slaves at length here, so you can go into the Hidayah and learn about slavery there. This is the best place to look. It's not, that chapter was completely left out of the Reliance, and also there's a follow-up to the Reliance, a sequel, which they have not translated because the Reliance has done them a lot of damage. And I think I've done more damage than anyone else with regards to the Reliance, where Islam is concerned. Let me just catch up with the comments. You're welcome, Horse. Magnum Opus, I don't know, I've got other long series coming. Maybe I just talk too much. Would we expect Coptic loanwords to expect to be found in Nabatean works? Well, because Islam has 50 plus languages in the Quran and over 2,000 loanwords. Mufti, yes, thank you. Thanks, Anila. Thanks, everyone. And let's see, there's some archaeological sites in Ethiopia I'd like to look up on the Google. So yeah, there's some very old churches there that have been discovered. Isn't there more Hebrew and Syriac in the Quran? Okay, let's have a look. Since we are talking about that, let's have a look. Okay, this is the table that I made of loanwords in the Quran. So let's actually have a look here. Close that. This is the foreign words in the Quran. Look up the book Foreign Words in the Quran by Arthur Jeffrey, which is in my archive. Okay. The number one language apparently is, now this list was made in 1937, so it's probably slightly out of date. Do bear that in mind. When I did some counting, I discovered a few new words, like the word Tawheed is not in Arthur Jeffrey's work. There's a few words that I discovered that are not present. So this does need to be updated. And Arnold, I will have to watch the whole monotheism series from the beginning. There's a lot of info my brain will take. Yeah, I know. People tell me I just blow their minds with too much info, too fast. So Syriac. Okay, Syriac. 382 words, followed by Aramaic, 300 words. Now you can consider this basically one language, right? This is effectively one language group, family. Then Hebrew, 257, Greek, 205, Ethiopic, 196, which of course is matched here with Amharic, 4. I know for a fact there's more than 196 Ethiopic words in Islam. There's definitely more than 196. But if you look at Coptic, if you go to Coptic, there's only 10 Coptic words known in the Quran. Right? But there's over 200. So there's a 10-to-1 ratio plus of Ethiopic, which tells us that Ethiopia has a far bigger impact on Islam and on the Quran, on the development of Islamic literature and the Arabic language than does Coptic. So Petra is kind of not as important as one would think because these terms, these cultural practices made their way in. 50 plus languages, over 2,000 loanwords must be the reason why it is so clear and well detailed. Exactly, Scrunchy. I mean, now look, for instance, okay, he's got this Norse word. Good grief. Okay. Now, I mean, hey, look, I just made a list of it. You tell me what's in there. You go read the book for yourself. I've looked at it. I don't quite understand what he means by a Norse word, but, and I haven't heard of half of these languages, but, if there's Old Norse in the Quran, I would not be surprised. If there's Martian in the Quran, that's definitely pure Arabic. As you know, all the Vikings were Muslims, brother. Stupid. So there's 55 languages that he identifies. Mjolnir. Yeah, of course, Mjolnir, because Muhammad's hammer, everyone knows about. So at least 2,059 loanwords in the Quran. Okay, at least 259 loanwords. And let me see, in terms of total percentage, there's a total percentage. 14% of the Quran at least is foreign words. 14% of the Quran is foreign words. So, take me to your Allah. So, yeah, so there you go. I mean, so Syriac is about 2.6%, Aramaic 2%, Hebrew. I did this all by hand, okay? I counted all this stuff myself. So yeah, this table is available. I mean, this table is available. I will share this now in the chat. Actually, let me just copy the link because I actually have made it available. I've made it available in my community section for everybody, but I am dropping it now. So what's this called? Foreign words in the Quran. This is the spreadsheet you can have a look at. Foreign words in the Quran, and there you go. Share that far and wide. There you go. That is the Excel spreadsheet. You guys can look at this for yourselves. Have I missed any comments? I thought umami was a taste of the tongue. Fair point, Murray. Islam leaves a bad taste on the tongue, so it could be related. Okay, Thor was Muslim. Of course, Sergeant Grant, Thor was Muslim. He was awesome. Come on, man. Come on. Don't call Mo a liar. So the series is phenomenal, but my favorite is 14, when Lloyd obliterates the standard narrative of Ishmael and his mother being cast out. Thank you. Yeah, I actually need to get back to that. I actually was going to do a whole thing on that and really floor that thing, flatten it, rather. Okay, yeah, what am I missing? Syriac, Aramaic, Hebrew, and Ethiopic are close. They're part of the same family. Yeah, they're all Semitic languages. But must understand that Ethiopic, now look, the Ethiopic as an existing, surviving language is technically the oldest language in the world, as the oldest continuously surviving language. It was cut off. It's over 5,000 years old. It was cut off from the rest of the world for a long time. And all of the sounds and most of the words in Arabic are within Ethiopic. So it actually is one of the root languages that created Arabic. Yeah, Allah's language is pure gibberish. JNM says, yeah, correct. It's not exactly, it's momotheism, as someone said yesterday. Okay. I mean, so yeah, it's momotheism, yeah. So okay, actually, let me show you what I have planned next. Okay. Let me show you what I have planned next. So I will show you, so my next talk. Yeah, so I need to finish shortly so I can have some dinner and another busy day tomorrow, work-wise. Okay, so this is my next series, which is related to this. I'm going to be talking somewhat, it's going to be a little bit of meander, but it talks about the founding. Sergeant Grinch, how many credits was this course? Good grief, man. Uni, explain that in another show. What did I miss? Deducer, what did I miss there? What do you think of the mysterious letters in the Quran? Oh, no, I've covered that at length multiple times. Uni, I've done that. Seriously, it's just, I should do a separate short video on it and just say, hey guys, here's this. Okay, so Ethiopian Orthodox Tawahedo Church and the Biblical Canon. All right, so this is the Ethiopian Orthodox Tawahedo Church, the origin of the word Tawheed, right? Save Muslims channel and website. Yeah, I know. You have no idea how many hours. And, okay, so yeah. So I'll show you, this is where we're going to go next, at least on this topic. So here's the black man and zebra. It's a 5th century Byzantine mosaic from Urfa in Turkey. Where's Urfa in Turkey, you may ask? Well, you'd be surprised to learn it's right up here by Hiran. And of course, it has an Ethiopian man. Now, hold on, what is an Ethiopian dude doing on a floor mosaic here in Hiran? Right? So understand, you'd think that I have a Copt. You'd think that I have someone from Petra, but no, they've got a dude from a black guy from Ethiopia, all the way from down this region, right here, in Hiran. We mentioned Hiran several times in this talk so far. So, why a 5th century Byzantine mosaic from Urfa, Sanliurfa, Turkey? This floor mosaic can be found in the Villa of the Amazons, a palatial house that belonged to an important administrator of the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire who lived in Edessa, now called Urfa. Right, so this is Urfa right here, just above Haran. It's a couple of kilometers above Haran. And this is Abraham's journey, right there, oddly enough. Okay, so that's that region right there. Now, the world, according to Herodotus, this was the whole world back in the day. Egypt, and anything below Egypt was Ethiopia. The whole of Africa below Egypt was called Ethiopia back in the day, and this was Babylon, this was Arabia. This was the map of the world. This was everything everyone knew. Right? This is another version of the same map. This was the whole world. This was the world back in the day, about 440 BC, right? And now, I'll do a couple of slides. Tawahedo, the origin of Tawhid. Tawahedo, Tewahedo. It's from the Ge'ez, Tawahedo. It's a Ge'ez word meaning being made one, unified, the unification of the Trinity. And origins, Tawahedo, Ge'ez, Tawhido is the modern pronunciation, Tewahido, related to the Arabic word Tawhid, understood as monotheism, but more literally the word means, Tawhid literally means unification, to become one. The term expresses the Ethiopian Orthodox Tawahedo Church's Miaphysite belief. Like other non-Chalcedonian, also known as Oriental Orthodox churches, it was cut off from dialogue with the Roman Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox churches until the mid-20th century because of Islam. It was isolated and cut off. That's why it has a very strong Jewish flavor. At which time, many of the Christological disputes that arose from the Council of Chalcedon were resolved through ecumenical dialogue. It should be noted that a lot of the practices that are conducted in the mosque today was taken from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Women covering up, the way that they take their shoes off, the way they separate the men and women, all of this was actually derived from the practices of this church. So, yeah, have I missed any decent comments? And the next time you fly down there, I would volunteer to carry your luggage. Thanks, man. Fly down to where? Oh, to Arabia. Oh, yeah, no. I'm not sure if I desperately want to go there, just in case they're waiting for me to arrive. Okay. Yeah, so let me see. And I need to share this foreign words with Saint Murad. Yeah, I mean, just send him the link. Just spam his channel with comments, right? The word was made flesh. Now, blah, blah, blah. Let me see where I was going with this. Yeah, so anyway, I've got this whole talk about... So I've got this whole long talk. Let me just go and... So anyway, I talk about the foundation of the early church, a lot of the conflicts that were happening in the early church. And this, of course, the Tewahedo, okay, it comes from to be united, to become one. Be united with each other, to be one, to unite, to declare to be one. The whole term, Tawahedo, and this is, of course, this is from the Comparative Dictionary of Ge'ez, right, classical Ethiopic. And there's a whole long section on it. There's much more than this, but I mean, this is enough to illustrate the point, right? So, yeah, I wear pants when I go to church, Deus Vult. So don't think you're special. I wear shoes too, right? And then, of course, we talk about the origin of the word church, because, I mean, there's a whole lot of discussion around that. But I talk about the origin of the church, the term Christians, where that comes from, and then we get into a little bit of discussion around Constantine the Great, and then we get into the Edict of Thessalonica, and we talk about Orthodoxy, and we talk about Arius and Arianism, because this stuff is very much related to Islam. And then we get into a whole lot of the Nicene Creed. We talk about we talk about a whole bunch of fascinating stuff about some of the early heretics, Nestorius especially, because he features in Islam, and then we discuss the Monophysites, the Miaphysites, the heresies, and so on. We try to clarify some of that, the Great Schism. In 1054, the Councils of Chalcedon, and we talk about the Council of Nicaea, right? So we speak of the Council of Chalcedon, we speak of Dioscorus, and right, then we talk about a whole bunch of stuff, and then we go to Ethiopia. So this is something that's coming up, and I think this would be very interesting for the history of the church and a lot of these outside influences. And then we start to connect this stuff. I haven't finished the sections on Islam. You can see here I'm still busy on that nonsense. All of the connections with Islam to Ethiopia. This is all the unfinished slides that I'm still busy working on. So yeah, so that's all coming. But that's, hopefully guys, that gives you an idea of where we're going next. And I've got a bunch of other stuff already done. So... yeah, so let me see. Have I missed anything? No. So guys, let's call it a night. It's been 90 minutes plus. There's Volt. I'm female. I cover my head. Okay, yeah, well, that's okay. So one day we'll look back on this moment, laugh nervously, and change the subject. Time to change the subject. Are Ethiopian Christians today? Yeah, the majority of Ethiopia is Christian. They are the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. They are strict Trinitarians. And they basically reconcile between the Orthodox themselves and the Catholic Church. So yeah. So guys, let me call it a night here. I need to go and get some food. And thank you very much for the support, for the great conversation. I'll use the term for long haul truck driving to 20 years ago. Horse, you should email me, and we need to chat one fine day. Enough excuses, And Thanks. So, guys, thank you very much. I will see you guys in a few days. I will be back. And yeah, I'll be doing a lot of stuff on Gnosticism. I'll be doing a lot of historical stuff. And but I'll do a show. Let's maybe do a show, and we'll talk about anything. I'll do an open Q&A, open AMA. So, guys, it's 2 a.m. Oh man, Farish, you are very committed. Take care, guys. It's 9 p.m. We'll see you next time. What about the Ark being hidden in Ethiopia? The Ark. I mean, there's no evidence for any of that stuff. It's all very speculative. I've looked at that in depth, and there's no point really going there, right? Yeah, I prefer to stick to things I can prove with definite histories we can rely upon. So, guys, have a wonderful night. God bless. Take care, everyone.